This is the BBC Home Service. Here is the news. The end of the war in Europe was officially announced by Mr. Churchill at 3 o'clock this afternoon in a broadcast from 10 Downing Street. He said, "Yesterday morning at 2:41 a.m. at General Eisenhower's headquarters, the representative of the German High Command and Government signed the act of unconditional surrender of all German land, sea and air forces in Europe to the Allied Expeditionary Force and to the Soviet High Command. Today, this agreement will be ratified and confirmed in Berlin, where Air Chief Marshal Tedder and General de Tassigny will sign on behalf of General Eisenhower, and Marshal Zhukov will sign for the Soviet High Command. Hostilities will end officially at 1 minute after midnight tonight, Tuesday the 8th of May. But to save lives, the ceasefire began yesterday to be sounded along all the fronts, and our dear Channel Islands are also to be freed today." The Prime Minister's statement said the Germans were still resisting the Russian troops, but if they continued after today, they would be attacked from all quarters by the Allies. It wasn't surprising that on such long fronts, and with the disorder of the enemy, the commands of the German High Command shouldn't have always been obeyed at once. But that was no reason for withholding the news of the unconditional surrender, nor should it prevent us from celebrating today and tomorrow as Victory in Europe days. "Today, perhaps," said Mr. Churchill, "we shall think mostly of ourselves. Tomorrow we shall pay a particular tribute to our heroic Russian comrades, whose prowess in the field has been one of the grand contributions to the general victory." Prime Minister ended, "Our gratitude to all our splendid allies goes out from our hearts in this island and the British Empire. We may allow ourselves a brief period of rejoicing, but let us not forget for a moment the toils and efforts that lie ahead. Japan, with all her treachery and greed, remained unsubdued. The injury she had inflicted on Great Britain and the United States and other countries, and her detestable cruelties, call for justice and retribution. We must now devote all our strength and resources to the completion of our task both at home and abroad. Advance, Britannia! Long live the cause of freedom! God save the King!" From Downing Street, Mr. Churchill, escorted by mounted police, drove down to the Commons through one of the densest crowds Whitehall has ever seen. It was 3:30 when the Prime Minister, smiling broadly, entered the tensely waited House to be greeted by a mighty roar of cheers. The House was full, and members jumped up, some of them onto the benches, and waved their order papers, while people in the side galleries and the strangers' gallery got up to join in the thunderous welcome. Mr. Churchill repeated the official statement of the surrender of the German forces, and at the end of it there was another great cheer for him. He went on to speak of his deep gratitude to the House of Commons, which had proved itself the strongest foundation for waging war that had ever been seen in the whole of our long history. "I recollect well," Mr. Churchill continued, "that at the end of the last war, more than a quarter of a century ago, after the House had heard the armistice terms, it did not feel inclined for debate or business, but desired to offer thanks to God, and I therefore beg to move that this House do now attend the Church of St. Margaret, Westminster, to give humble and reverent thanks to Almighty God for our deliverance from the threat of German domination." And Mr. Churchill explained that this was the identical resolution which was moved after the last war. The House of Commons then went in procession to St. Margaret's and later adjourned. Just before joining the procession, Mr. Churchill crossed the chamber and shook hands warmly with members of the opposition. A statement similar to Mr. Churchill's had been made in the House of Lords by Lord Woolton, and after it the Lords went to a Thanksgiving service at Westminster Abbey. The Prime Minister had lunch with the King and Queen at Buckingham Palace. Later he and members of the War Cabinet and Chiefs of Staff were received by the King, who congratulated them on the victory. Mr. Churchill went on to the balcony with the King and Queen and the Princesses before he left the palace. Early this evening, vast crowds gathered in Whitehall and started shouting, "We want Churchill, we want Winnie." And just before 6, he walked out onto the balcony of the Ministry of Health building. A deafening roar went up. With his cigar at an aggressive angle, the Prime Minister gave the V sign, and the crowd roared, "Good old Winnie." The Prime Minister tried to speak, but at first couldn't make himself heard. His colleagues on the balcony with him signalled for silence, and in a minute the vast audience was uncannily quiet. In a strong, firm voice, the Prime Minister said, "God bless you all. This is your victory, the victory of the cause of freedom. In all our long history, we have never seen a greater day than this. Neither the long years, nor the dangers, nor the fierce attacks of the enemy have weakened the resolve of the British people. This is your day, and yours too," the crowd roared back. "God bless you all," Mr. Churchill repeated. "God bless you too," replied the people. Mr. Churchill's broadcast this afternoon was clearly heard in places as far away as New Zealand, Barbados, and Montreal. While he was speaking from Downing Street, President Truman in Washington was broadcasting the surrender proclamation to the American people. "This is a solemn but glorious hour," he said. "I only wish Franklin D. Roosevelt could have lived to witness it." The President went on to stress that victory over Japan still had to be won. There must be no let-up in America's effort. France also heard the surrender proclamation this afternoon in a broadcast by General de Gaulle. He sent brotherly greetings from the French people to their gallant allies and to all those men and women in the world who had suffered and worked that the cause of liberty and justice might prevail. At home, the whole country has been celebrating the day in thanksgiving and rejoicing. The thousands of Londoners who made a night of it last night were joined soon after daybreak by many thousands more, and by 9 o'clock dense crowds were converging on Whitehall, Westminster, and Buckingham Palace, as well as eastwards to St. Paul's, where a special Thanksgiving service was held at noon. The King and Queen listened to Mr. Churchill's broadcast in their private apartments at Buckingham Palace, and then went out onto the balcony with the two princesses to greet the cheering crowds. Reports from other big cities repeat London's story of Thanksgiving services in cathedrals and churches, of huge crowds in the street to hear Mr. Churchill's speech relayed by loudspeakers, and of gay processions, songs and cheers, flags and favours, bands, dancing, whistles, rattles, and bonfires. As a tailpiece to Victory Day, we give you Britain's weather on the day that it happened. That's something you haven't heard about since the war began. Victory Day started with violent rainstorms in many districts, but most of the time it's been sunny and very warm. And here is tonight's weather forecast. There will be sporadic rain over the whole country, with thunder in places, but there will be bright intervals in most districts. The weather will continue warm, except on the northeast coast, where there will be local fog. Outlook for Thursday, unsettled, local thunder, and somewhat cooler. There's also news today of a long-lost friend, the Large Depression. It's turned up again between Ireland and the Azores, where it's reported at the moment to be almost stationary.